Welcome everybody to our webinar on the values-based approach to ESG, ecological social governance, ESG business model innovation, and the EU-funded project we run on this topic, together with Mariënkroon Conference Center. My name is Markus. I am a strategy and business model consultant, supporting companies and organizations in phases of big change. This is today's agenda. After a small introduction, we explore some fundamentals of ESG. Then we will present you the structure of the upcoming handbook on ESG business model innovation and give you an outlook to the webinars to come. At the end, there is space for questions, and we will be happy to hear your comments. I want to introduce our webinar with a question. Did you ever think on a planet where there is no pollution, no noise, no global warming, and around beautiful nature, and where there is peace, where all people have the possibility for a decent and happy life with their families and friends, without stress and adding value to others through their talents? We think that is possible. This wonderful planet and a peaceful society is an important value for us. The UN Agenda 2030 defines the journey to go, and this is defined in this Sustainable Development Goal 12, Sustainable Consumption and Production, as an important element to achieve this goal. In our Erasmus Plus project, we focus on sustainability on the business side, which goes hand in hand with sustainable consumption patterns. In our approach, we integrate an innovation by the economy of communion and focus also on motivation, values, culture, and co-creation based on good interpersonal relationships to achieve sustainability. Together with this innovation in the interpersonal sphere, the necessary transformation of millions of business models is possible. It is possible to make this vision of a thriving planet happen. We are of the opinion that the political ESG framework created for this purpose is valuable when it is perceived as an opportunity by businesses and organizations, NGOs, family businesses, and social enterprises. To support this necessary trend, we have chosen to elaborate a powerful method of a values-based approach to ESG business model innovation, especially for those managers, entrepreneurs, business leaders and consultants, and co-creators who want to make a difference and add value to the planet through their time, work, and creative activity. We are developing in this EU-funded project a handbook guiding managers in their process of ESG business model innovation. With management training formats, webinars, and podcasts, we are going to create awareness and build capacity. These are the main speakers of today's webinar. There is Tibor from Hungary, ESG expert and consultant. There is Jean-Marc, a circular economy consultant from the Netherlands. In addition, there is Frank, Germany, senior manager for a long time, marketing expert and consultant. I myself, I am the project manager. We have chosen an EU-funded project as a platform for collaboration, helping us to scale the impact. With this project, we want to support entrepreneurs, managers, and especially also of NGOs and businesses for common good who have decided to transform their business models according to ESG standards and who want to add value to the planet. We are following as mentioned before, a values-based approach, putting people in the context of their relationship to each other and to the planet with its wonderful natural ecosystem. We are addressing three main challenges with our project, three main challenges of entrepreneurs and business leaders. One challenge is to prepare the corporate culture for an ESG innovation journey. The second challenge consists in finding a way of combining ESG business model transformation with a long-term competitive advantage in the market. The third challenge is to integrate ESG transformation into business strategy and to achieve an ESG-aligned business vision with the available resources. Tibor, now tell us something about ESG and the related opportunities.
So let's start with the roots and the historic evolution of responsibility for the world and sustainability as part of it. If we look back, we can see that in the academic world, already in the 1950s, concepts emerged about corporate social responsibility, in short CSR, which needed about 20 years in the USA and even more in Europe to get implemented in the business. Thus, by the 70s, it was already known and partly implemented, and that's why the founder of neoliberal approach, Milton Friedman, started to fight against doing something which is linked to social responsibility by declaring that there is one and only one social responsibility of business to increase its profit. Or even shorter, in his famous New York Times article, stating that the business of business is business. And even adding that those business leaders who have other goals as well are guilty of analytical looseness and lack of rigor. Quotes from Milton Friedman. It required several decades until the leaders of the companies were ready, able, and willing to accept and implement the concept of CSR. After 40 years, in the mid-90s, the so-called triple bottom line approach was developed, again, first in the academic world by Professor Elkington, and gradually introduced into the business world. Later on, with a more marketing-oriented slogan, profit, people, planet, the 3 Ps. This signalized that sustainability is very important economically, which means companies have to be profitable, and they have a system to measure it, which is the accounting system. But besides the profit, also the humanistic approach, the people are very important. And last, but absolutely not least, the protection of the planet became a goal. So the triple bottom line concept means that companies started to make reports, besides financial statements, a report about what they have done for the humans and also what they have done for the planet in their activities throughout the year. More than a decade later, a new abbreviation was introduced, the ESG, in which E stands for environmental, S for social, and G for governance. Thus, the triple bottom line was extended by an additional aspect of governance. In fact, governance is not just an addition, but it's a revolutionary new approach, because governance determines also the aspects of S and E pillars. Today, ESG is well known and widely used, especially in the European Union, where we have already acknowledged regulations since 2024 being obligatory for the big companies from this year, from 2025 on. Let's now dig deeper in the content of the topics of the 3 letters to see what the focus areas are. As for the first one, environment, it's relatively easy to understand that we are looking for clean air, supported by clean technology, or ensuring the more and more valuable clean water use and conservation on the highest sustainable level. In general, switching to green economy from buildings over agriculture to energy, and taking care about climate change impact risks and their mitigation. Also involved is the planning and design thinking of products for the whole life cycle, including the recycling aspects. All these aspects can be measured and can be evaluated and even be scored very easily, while the same is much more difficult in case of the social aspect, which are more soft and subjective issues like human rights at work, or the aspects about workplace from a safety point of view, or the minority issues, for example, disabled people's discrimination in case of hiring. Also, how the salaries and the compensation of the employees are arranged. The new topic of governance includes many ethical aspects, like executive compensation, both the process and the outcome, transparency, code of conduct, tax strategy and compliance, including the responsible bodies set up for checking the company's behavior. In short, these aspects take care about all the stakeholders, not just the shareholders. ESG is also aligned with the UN concept. Parallel to the responsibility evolution in the business world described up to now, there was an even broader movement which was initiated by the United Nations. This is called Sustainable Development Goals, in short SDG, and was accepted by the United Nations General Assembly in 2015, setting forth all the critical areas mankind is facing as economic, social, and environmental challenges to be solved by 2030. This framework is focusing on 16 topics, from poverty and hunger over equal rights to the different forms of environmental sustainability regarding clean water and energy and climate in general. There are business-related aspects too, like decent work, innovation, etc., and some good governance society aspects, like reduced inequalities, justice, peace, and related strong institutions. Its broadness is not only the variety of the 16 topics, but also because of the 17th, which aims the collaboration of public, which means government, with private, which means business, and civil society across all UN countries as a really truly global partnership. Both the SDG and the ESG frameworks operate under the same principle: the need to establish a sustainable and just global economy and society. In fact, they are complementing each other. The slide shows on one hand the 16+1 SDG aspects, on the other hand, how they relate to the ESG approach, and as we can see, they are overlapping, in some cases, with all the 3 ESG pillars, and supporting, ultimately, the same goals. Once there is a regulation, there must be some kind of proof, like in case of financial regulation, the accounting-based tax reports. While audited reports are supposed to serve the original goals, too often they become ends instead of means. This is the danger and risk in case of ESG reporting too. To aim sustainability was already a voluntary option in the past too. Some people in different functions, on different hierarchical levels, have sometimes pushed it with different purposes and very different top management level support. Where it was allocated to communications, in most cases it was just a lip service, a marketing tool for better positioning the company. So some devoted people tried to push for putting sustainability thinking into business, but in most cases it was not considered as part of the core business, just as an add-on. If we really think that companies, those their leaders, are not just responsible for economic sustainability, but also for the environmental sustainability, as well as the social aspects, and even for the responsible overall corporate governance, then this holistic sustainability should be considered as the core activity, which includes, of course, business thinking too. This is the only way not to approach, for example, environmental issues only or even primarily from a poor financial point of view. Unfortunately, it still remains more profitable in most cases, at least in the short term for businesses, to do harm to the planet than to change those finance issues conquering environmental aspects. On the other hand, competitiveness is key, especially these days when recession and uncertainties hit the world economy. This is why the European Union speaks about competitive sustainability, integrating the two goals and related terms instead of an either-or relationship. To make it happen, and not just on a voluntary basis and without any structure, the EU introduced a regulation in 2024, the so-called Corporate Sustainability Directive, so at least the bigger companies are obliged to prepare their data-driven sustainability reports annually from 2025 on. On that way, sustainability reporting has become a top management issue, which is good news. However, if the reporting becomes more important than the original goals, we miss the target. Therefore, our approach is the business transformation, which starts on the strategic level when we propose and show the method and tools how to integrate ESG into the company strategy organically and completely, not just as a chapter. To support this transformation, we are going to develop and release a handbook for it, and Frank will speak about it.
Yeah, thank you, Tibor. As you mentioned, I will show you now over the next 3 slides a brief overview on the structure and contents of a handbook, a so-called ESG handbook, which we as a team developed in order to help all kinds of companies to manage this challenge, which you have just mentioned, Tibor. Let's start with slide number 1. Looking at the highest level structure of the slide, you can see in the blue boxes that we built our handbook basically in 3 steps, following a very clear and practical logic. You can see in step number 1, we call it building ESG knowledge. Then you see step number 2, which is called apply tools and methods. And then the 3rd step, we call it implement. It's the final step which helps you to make it happen. Now, looking into the first step, so-called building, here is where we explain the fundamentals of ESG. So the readers know about ESG fundamentals and other important concepts, what they truly mean, and why they are important. Tibor, you already touched upon this, but in our handbook, the readers will then finally see we have much more around this topic. Then in the 2nd step, in the apply step, we introduce tools and methods for putting ESG business model innovation into practice. And in the final step, in the implement step, we will focus in our handbook on how to embed ESG into your strategy, into your company strategy, and into your daily operations. Well, this structure reflects on how change really happens, typically from having insight into getting action, and finally, hopefully, leading into a successful implementation. We have the ambition that in our handbook, that it is really a practical and a very effective, and we call it a step-by-step guide for building ESG competence in your company, in the reader's company environment. Our ambition is that the handbook we are developing can be applied by users from different industry, different organizations, and also from company sizes, from a small to even to a bigger company. Now, I would say let's go even one level deeper into our handbook and explore it a little bit further, what you can expect in the future. Here you can see a more detailed view of the handbook. And if you have a focus on the top line of the slide, which is called or labeled chapters, you can see that our handbook is structured into 6 chapters. Well, the chapters 1 to 3 are basically laying the foundation of ESG and of our handbook. You can see the major learning goals we have defined for these chapters are to understand the ESG basics, to identify stakeholders, to understand risks and opportunities of an ESG approach, and also important how ESG is linked to a strategy of a company. Then we are moving in chapter 4 really deep. We call it the engine room of our work. It's a really comprehensive chapter, and our readers will find in the future a we call it actionable ESG innovation toolbox, which contains a lot of methods and guidance for implementing ESG and ESG innovation in all different kinds of business models. The key learning objectives in this chapter are to understand the different innovation tools which we are offering, and also very important how the readers and the users can apply them into their business. So it should be really an actionable approach. And finally, if you then have a look in our handbook, chapters 5 and 6, they outline basically the implementation steps for an ESG strategy, very important. They only briefly touch it, how you develop action plans once you have defined your targets, and basically also how you track change in your organization over time if you move on with ESG. Well, from our experience, these key topics we defined in the handbook are really important, and they give you a very concise overview, if you read our handbook in the future, how to make your business model stronger, even with a strong focus on sustainability in the ESG arena. Now, a final deep dive to give you a flavor on chapter 4. We really move deep into the application phase. As I mentioned, our handbook, we have the ambition to be very practical, very hands-on. It's the engine room, how we call it. And it's an introduction to chapter 4 of our ESG innovation toolbox. You will see our toolbox, which we then describe. It is building on very established tools and methods in the marketing and sales and strategy area. However, partially we have even further adapted them, further developed them through our own project work and ESG workshop experience during our Erasmus project, which Markus defined nicely. The tools you will find in this toolbox, they help you to rethink your business and then also to help you to transform your business model. And it's important always with a focus on sustainability and a positive values-based impact. Now, to give you a flavor, let me give you some examples of what kind of tools you can find. There is, for example, you can see it on the right side of the slide, a very central tool in our toolbox. We call it the Business Model Canvas. This tool is really important and very powerful to help you to rethink your business model elements. For example, with respect how you create value with which kind of products and services, what kind of customer relationships you have today and how you can build them in the future and kind of partnerships. And important, I can only repeat it, always through a lens of an ESG view. The second tool in our analysis is the classical value chain analysis. This is a very powerful tool which helps you to identify ESG risks and opportunities across your entire business process. That can be on the supplier side, it can be on the customer side, it can be on the external influencer side, and even beyond. A very powerful tool, and you will see it in our handbook, how you can apply it in your business environment with respect to ESG. And finally, I took one example here. It's the circular economy model, which helps you to identify opportunities to shift your organization from a linear model to a circular system, very important model, which can be applied in a lot of different business environments, and you will learn more about that in our handbook too. These are just a few examples, and in our handbook, we present much more tools along always, and that's important, with practical tips, with some best practices where we found them, and also with further recommended readings, so the readers can even dive deeper beyond our workbook. Well, I hope this overview gave you a nice overview. It makes you curious about our upcoming workbook, and it has shown you what you can expect, basically, if you want to proceed on your own ESG journey. Now, with these 3 slides, I want to hand over to Jean-Marc. Jean-Marc, you would like to give us an overview on what's coming up in the webinar 2 and 3, where we really go deep into the workbook. And I'm happy to continue, Jean-Marc, and to understand more what's coming up with the next webinars.
Yes, thank you, Frank. Indeed, we want to dig deeper into the topic. And the webinar 2 will be, so now we're in the Netherlands, as we said before, in Mariënkroon, one of the partners. And the webinar 2 will be in January in Hungary. And there is a third webinar also, which is being organized in the second quarter of next year, and that is going to be in Germany. When we look at the webinar 2, to give a quick overview, we want to take out, as Frank said, also take out from this toolbox a few tools. And we could explain, we are going to explain those tools also more into details. We also want to offer practical support, but also pros and cons of having different business models. And indeed, it's nice to speak about theory, but we also want to put it into practice. So what you can expect from the next webinars will be an introduction and guidance through the tools. And we're also going to discuss and walk through a few selected ESG tools, as we now, you had a small preview from Frank. And as I said, it's important to bridge from theory to practice. And we want to help for you, for entrepreneurs, for maybe people surrounded to you also in the business world, to make them understand the different tools and maybe find one that can increase the positive impact and reduce the negative environmental impact. This allows, as Tibor also said, to future-proof your business. It's going further than only regulations, but it's really adding value. And in the same time, it's a free advice that you can adapt to your own company. Looking at the webinar 3, you can also come up with your own business model innovation. And we can design the training and have a workshop that will be based on your business. So again, in the third webinar, we're going to again dig deeper of the handbook of the tools that we already discussed and saw before, but we're going to also look at the different phases of innovation, and we're going to look at different methods. The goal here also is to collaborate. Collaborate, which means we're going to share best practices in between entrepreneurs, because we believe that collaboration here is an important tool. So in the webinar 3, we also going to see, okay, which tools can you apply in your own company? And this should allow you to get a broader view and more knowledge around all the possibilities to add value to your business and go above regulatory requirements. So the goal here is to gain insights on how to collaborate with different stakeholders, especially at the value chain. The value chains are going further than only your suppliers, looking at every actor from the beginning till the end of your product. So again, why is this interesting for you? Well, of course, not only it allows you to stay up to date with the latest trends, but you can master the essentials and boost your ESG, your environmental, social, and governance success within your company, while also going further.
Yes, so thank you, Jean-Marc. Thank you for this outlook already to the webinar. Thank you, Tibor, for introducing us into the world of ESG and how it can benefit, let's say, how organizations can benefit. And thank you also, Frank, for this announcing, let's say, this dive into the tools. And maybe we need to stress also that ESG transformation, which we describe and where we built the method, is not only for business organizations, it's all for all kinds of organizations, NGOs also, and especially also social enterprises, enterprises for common good, enterprises of economy of communion. So we develop a universal method that any organizational model, business model can transform according to ecological, social, and governance standards. And now, having said this, now we are coming to a question and answer moment. So we are looking forward to hear your comments and some of your questions now.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear very well. Your question is very well.
Great, thank you. Thank you all for the introduction of this interesting project and also for the background information, very useful. I would like to share 2 questions, but very briefly, just as a matter of introduction. I'm based in the Netherlands, and I teach at the University of Applied Sciences here in The Hague, where I live, in the areas of sustainability, finance, and leadership, and often the intersection of those 3. So, well, most of these topics are familiar, and of course, I'm happy to hear about these developments as well. What I'd like to ask, it's actually 2 things, if I'm allowed. The first one is, in the program and in the tools, the way you've explained them, I understand the logic of those three main points, and I'm then curious about the one of the phases, let's call it. And under the phase of implementation, I'd like to know what attention is given to leadership in particular, because I mean, of course, it's a very important and necessary development if ESG becomes more integrated in the business model, and not only as a technical process, but really as a conscious decision by businesses. But that also really requires a certain mindset and a sort of a value based, as you call it, this session also, by leadership and actually by all participants. So I'd like to understand how that's also incorporated in your approach. And my second and smaller question would be, if you could perhaps explain a tiny bit better what, so in addition to the webinars and the handbook that I understand is coming, does this initiative also actually provide consulting and services to businesses or other institutions, or is it focused on awareness creation and sharing of knowledge?
Yes, thank you, Rose.
That's it. Thank you.
Thank you so much for these very interesting questions, especially also the first one about leadership and mindsets, which we also think it's key. And as we mentioned in the introduction, also we follow a particular approach, a values-based approach. So we think that culture and value is a key element in this transformation method, also what we want to suggest. But maybe I would ask one of my teammates, Frank, maybe can you add some words to this leadership question?
Yeah, Markus, and first of all, Rosa, that's an excellent question. Thank you for this. So all of us, we are absolutely confident that we could answer your question with yes, it is of extreme importance that the leadership role is playing in this whole. So first of all, we know that leadership is very important to create the environment for this ESG thinking, first of all, so that you as a manager, you open your teams if they're not coming up with their own requests. So it's in the opening phase, in the exploration phase of ideas on how to position ESG, very important to have the right leadership style, that people feel involved. And finally, as you mentioned, also in the implementation. So we are extremely convinced, and we know it from our own experience from different angles, that leadership plays a crucial role in initiation, in driving this thinking, and also in the implementation phase. And most of us know implementation is not that easy. So leadership needs to encourage, needs to give the right resources and so on. So it's an important role, and hence we have designed this current project, Erasmus, with a certain scope, which is building the basics. And we are extremely confident that we can maybe come up with some additional projects in the future, stressing even more the leadership role, which is something we cannot tackle in this project as the scope is defined. But to answer your question, it's a very important role leadership is playing here. Hopefully that answers the question of Rosa and Markus, and maybe we can touch on the what deliverables of the hand.
Maybe I would add just one additional thought. Leadership is the basis for it, because pure management was the approach before, where we focused on accounting system and tax and profit, basically. And as you said, leadership is what integrates all these aspects, having a much more holistic approach, driven by the values Frank mentioned, and our aim is really to spread the news that the new regulation supports this way of thinking and does not want to replace it by outsourced report engagements to consulting companies or legal offices. So I think your question is not just justified, but it shows how important it is to move from a pure profit-oriented management to a much more holistic approach of taking this responsibility of the people, of the planet, and also about the profit, of course.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tibor. Rose, is this answering your question?
Yes, definitely. I'm happy to hear, and I think it also makes the integration more complete, right? Because we're all talking about change, but I think we also know that it needs to start very small, otherwise it doesn't have the effect that we talk about, right? So that's where leadership starts.
Exactly. Thank you. And we are even integrating values, corporate culture, and mindset also in our business model radar, let's say, so in our analysis tool, because we think actually that this interpersonal relationship aspect is a crucial element for a successful transformation. Thank you so much for this question. Your second question, if we would need consulting also to complete it, maybe some coaching. Jean-Marc, you want to add something to this in our approach, let's say, or?
Yeah, so definitely, if you don't know the business world and you don't know the management tools, and it can feel overwhelmed that all of a sudden you get a 40, 50, 60-page handbook with a lot of management tools. So yes, of course, with the team, we also want to support more into helping entrepreneurs to really make the next steps. Within the training, it is possible to also use an organization as an example, and also outside the training itself, we can also provide trainings for the organization in the place itself. Yeah.
Exactly. What Jean-Marc says brings us to an element. We are focusing also especially on small and medium-sized enterprises, family businesses who are not able to pay, let's say, expensive consultants, but they can be part of our training. So we train the trainer and then they can run the transformation in their organizations themselves. So it would be a combination, but our target is to enable people, let's say, in organizations to run this transformation, this business model transformation. So thank you. Yes, Tibor?
In the chat room, there was a question about how to get more information about our ESG handbook.
Yeah.
I gave a short answer to Chris, but maybe it's good to share with everybody that
Yes.
The handbook will be ready next year, and all those who are keeping in touch with us, they will know about it, and it will be accessible for everybody.
Exactly. And in case you already have started in an organization, some ESG transformation, some sustainability strategy, or even only reporting, let's say, you're very welcome to share your experience with us. Maybe we might also be able to include something or to take some best practice examples still in. So let's see if there is some other information in the.
Raymond Bonsoir is having a question as well.
Yes. Raymond, yes. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. My name is Ray. Yes, I'm exploring the ESG as well. Don't you think that also the supply chain is important in the ESG?
Yeah, thank you, Raymond. This is a good point, because in our training, let's say, in our trainings and management consulting, we discovered that ESG transformation is only at a certain part only an organizational topic, depending on an organizational decision, because it's the business ecosystem around which needs to transform, and only then, let's say, an individual business can transform very well if also the ecosystem, the customers, the suppliers, and also the investors, for instance, they all understand the concept and are also transforming. So in our approach, I think is a very good question, because in our approach, we focus also on the context, let's say. businesses can trigger also transformation in their business ecosystem, but on the same way, we are using, for instance, pestle analysis to understand the surrounding, the context, also to understand the context, but also to influence the context, let's say, to influence also customer behavior to more sustainable products.
Okay. Nice, thank you.
Thank you, Raymond, for this question. Let's see if there's something else in the chat. Yes. There was one, yes. Matt Driver, one question. I would say an organization's true values are demonstrated through how people are treated, staff, customers, suppliers. So leadership behavior is crucial in driving success. Yes, thank you, Matt, for this question. It is similar to Rosa's question. We are actually following this values-based approach. We are letting us inspire by the economy of communion, which is a people-centered economy, and also focusing on interpersonal relationships. And we have wonderful business experience already, which have started the journey of ESG transformation. And we have seen there that leadership, let's say the entrepreneur, taking the first step, being also coherent in his private life, what ecological and sustainable practices regard, is very crucial, let's say. So we will have for sure a plurality of values in our organizations, but one of the elements what we try to have part of the method and strengthen is also these values that ecological, social aspects become a values, a shared value, let's say, in the organizations who undergo this transformation. As Rosa said, let's say the mindset is important because many big corporations have struggled with the transformation because not all of their employees, not all of their staff, let's say, are pulling in the right direction. So we think it needs a new culture, let's say, it needs these values, and especially the leadership of the entrepreneurs and of the managers. Thank you, Matt, for this contribution. Let's see if we have something else in our chat. I think if there is no further question.
Chris asked us, what do you mean by from sustainability thinking in business to business thinking in sustainability? Maybe I was not clear enough. The first one means that the company thinks in business, and as I said, from a practical point of view, if they develop a strategy or if they have an annual plan, they also, among others, speak about sustainability as a separate chapter or a separate topic, and sometimes it's linked to the overall core business. And if we go the other way around, business thinking and sustainability, that means that the prime approach is sustainability. We consider our activity, even if it's a business, as a part of the sustainability approach of mankind in the field of economy, in the form of a business. And within this sustainability framework, being a business, we also think about the activities and the profitability and so on, but within this framework. That means the two aspects, the traditional business aspect and the sustainability aspect, are really integrated instead of being one over the other. Is this convincing, or have I answered your question, Chris?
Maybe we can complete in the meantime. We get inspired also from the social enterprise movements. These are businesses created for the common good, let's say. And of course, this is a very inspiring element that there's something about the profit, let's say, a common good orientation. And slowly but surely, many businesses through corporate social responsibility, ESG transformation, are moving towards this objective of adding value to the planet, to common good. And let's say the profit becomes then a criteria, let's say, allowing you to stay in the market, but it's not the overall target and objective of a business. This is a long transformation, and I think it's very valuable because businesses can only be successful if they have this intrinsic approach, let's say, if they strengthen these values, that common good is important, and also businesses can have this kind of driving force to work for the common good and staying into the market, being competitive in the market in the same way, and maybe especially in the future and also now already, because they focus on ecology and integrate social elements into their business model. Thank you, Tibor, also for this clarification. And now we are coming to an end. Our time is running out. I hope that we could introduce you into our work on developing an efficient method of how to accompany business into ESG excellence and combine it together, as we say it, with competitive advantage and through a deeply rooted process of business model innovations. And many organizations and business models show big potential in this view of ESG transformation. Starting a business model innovation process and integrating ESG in a strategy roadmap of a company is a first step to explore this potential. As indicated, we are of the opinion that within a few years, society and the market will integrate ESG standards, will have to integrate ESG standards for the sake of having a healthy planet. An ESG business model innovation process helps to ensure trust and loyalty of employees, customers, partners, and investors. ESG transformation often goes hand in hand with the development of business ecosystems, as we already said before, and especially the organizational culture. Mindset and values play an important role. This is a long-term investment, but those businesses starting now their ESG business model innovation, those organizations who start this journey now, will be ahead of the game. And now some words to the availability of our handbook. It will be available as a PDF file for electronic download on the platform of the European Union and our partner websites. So don't already forget now to register for your personal PDF copy of the handbook in the email address, which will be presented in one of our slides.
The first previous one.
Yes, it was already in the previous slide. And we invite all participants and future audience to share experience as an entrepreneur and manager in view of values-based ESG business model innovation, as well as insight of your organizational journey towards sustainability. Your contribution, as we mentioned, might be useful for the final version of the handbook and the management training we are developing also under our project. And also academics and consultants who are engaged in management, education and training, you're also very welcome and kindly invited to share your experience in creating training formats for executives and also for students. So we are happy that if you contact us, and yeah, then I want to thank, let's say, big thanks to all who have followed this webinar online today. Thank you so much for being part of it. Our thanks goes also to all the participants in the EU-funded project, all involved staff of the partner organizations and companies, and especially also to the universities, university representatives who have supported the initiative through quality assessment and enabling a pilot course, for instance, in Austria in January. And in particular, I thank also the network and businesses of the economy of communion who were ready to share their ESG transformation journeys and inspiring our tools and our content. Together, we are able to scale our ESG impact and make the planet a good place to live, also for the next 10, 20, and why not hundreds generations. As informed, the next webinar on ESG business model innovation will be a deep dive into content, tools, and our powerful method. So please don't forget already to register now to be invited for the next webinar. And we wish you a pleasant day and hope to see you at the next webinar soon. Bye-bye. It was a pleasure to have you all here.
Hi, thank you.
Thank you all.